Hello and welcome to India Tonight. I'm Karan Thakur. In the wake of the Bhopal judgment, both FICCI and CII have called upon the government to amend the Companies Act and relieve independent directors of criminal and perhaps also civil liability in the event of similar mishaps in the future. The move, however, has met with strenuous opposition. Let me bring in Rajeev Chandrasekhar. In an article in the Business Standard yesterday, Mr. Chandrasekhar, you wrote that this is an unacceptable proposition and you added it will prove counterproductive. Why do you take that position?
No, look, I think, Karan, the argument that is being proposed that there is a demand for independent directors and therefore there should be a dilution in the law is a flawed argument. It's not a tenable argument. I mean, you can't go around diluting law because there is need for increased number of independent directors. However, there is an argument to be made that the law as it stands today does not define the obligations of independent directors accurately and clearly enough. Where there are instances on the fringe, independent directors are held accountable when they ought not to be. That is a valid argument, that there is a need to amend the law where the obligations of the independent director are much clearer defined and the penalties against those obligations are therefore much clearer defined. But to hold an argument that we hold independent directors completely excused from obligations because we want 18,000 directors or 20,000 directors or 25,000 directors or even 2 directors is not an argument. It's like saying let's just wipe out law because we have people who don't want to be prosecuted under law.
Rajeev Chandrasekhar, this is really in a sense the core of the issue. If a non-executive director, an independent director is not involved in the specific decision-making process, if he's not involved in the implementation, is it right to hold him or her morally responsible when that decision goes wrong?
No, Karan, this discussion of the obligations of an independent director, or as Gurucharan said, the obligation of a director, is in the context of negligence, fraud and malfeasance. It's really not supposed to extend into the area and domain of accidents, unforeseen accidents and so on and so forth. And that is exactly the point I made in the beginning, which is clearly the law has to be made much more specific in differentiating fraud, negligence, malfeasance as one category of issues that the independent director cannot wriggle out of, and the other issues that Amit is referring to, which is accidents, normal workplace incidents and so on and so forth. So there is a need to differentiate these two.
Rajeev Chandrasekhar, do you want to answer it? Given that independent directors are entirely dependent upon what executive functionaries give them and they have no access to any independent means of their own, is it fair to hold them accountable?
No, look, let's be very clear. This word independent director is meant to define a class of directors that are independent from the executive and therefore independently apply their mind and therefore have independent access and audit of what has been presented to them. If the proposition that Dr. Mitra is proposing is that independent directors are a group of consultants who sit on the board and just go through reports that the executive management present them and say yes or no, then obviously the independent director is not doing his job. The independent directors in a board must have, and if he is to be independent, must have access to independent counsel. He must have access to independent audit and auditors, and that is the definition of independence. Now, just to say that.
Sorry, yeah, carry on.
Go ahead.
Carry on.
No, I have a fundamental problem with the way independent directorships work in India. It has become less of an oversight institution and more of this cozy consulting group of people who are there for advice. We must understand that independent directors are not advisors to the board. They are meant to be independently assuring themselves of what is right and wrong and what is going right and wrong in the company.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, at least 2 government committee reports have backed what Dr. Mitra and CII are today calling for. I refer to the Naresh Chandra Committee in 2002 and the Narayan Murthy Committee in 2003. Your position is different to theirs. Are you suggesting that they didn't pay adequate scrutiny and attention to the real moral issues involved here?
No, look, I mean, government committees, you know, whatever be the titles of these committees have never really impressed me because I think the fact is today there's a simple truth, which is when a company commits a fraud, there ought to be somebody held accountable. I mean, that is the basic truth for which we need to be finding solutions. Now, in the current context, you know, common sense tells you that if a company commits a fraud or there is negligence, you hold the board of directors accountable without any distinction in the board of directors or differentiation in the board of directors.
Okay.
Now, if that premise is sought to be compromised and diluted, then the question is who will be held accountable, and who will be held accountable for the damage, either financially or, as in the case of Bhopal, through deaths. So the issue is about accountability, and in my concern is that this debate being propagated is moving towards diluting accountability and ownership of a specific set of issues like fraud, negligence, and malfeasance.
Well,